Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show James Clear, who writes about science-based ideas for living a better life and building habits that stick. James, I know you teach people a lot about habit building. Can you give me one or two suggestions to get people who maybe are a little bit too lazy on track?
Sure. Well, first, Doug, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. As far as places to start for building new habits, there are a variety of things we can do, but if I were to summarize two useful tips, I would say the first one is start with a habit that is incredibly small, one that almost seems laughable or unthreatening to any degree. It's so easy you can't say no to it. And the thing that most people forget when it comes to building new behaviors is that we get wrapped up in the goal, get wrapped up in the results, the thing that we're trying to achieve, the outcome that we're going for, and it becomes really easy to talk yourself into doing more or reaching for that particular goal rather than focusing on building the new behavior into your life, which actually doesn't have to focus on the goal in the beginning. I'll give you one example. I have a reader who over the course of about 2 years lost over 100 pounds, and when he was adding exercise into his life, when most people look at that goal, they would say, oh, I want to lose, 20 pounds in the next 6 months or 40 pounds in the next 6 months or whatever it is. Rather than focus on the goal, he focused on the behavior. And he said, okay, I need to become the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. So I'm going to focus on going to the gym every day, but I can't stay longer than 5 minutes. I have to go, but once it gets to 6 minutes, I have to leave. And that's a goal that is so small that it's unthreatening, right? He showed up, he was there for his 5 minutes, then it got to 6 minutes, and he was like, all right, I'm out of here. And he did this for 4 to 6 weeks. And at that point, he had become the type of person who wasn't missing workouts. And he was like, all right, now I'm going to be here all the time. Let me go ahead and increase the intensity a little bit. And that's a complete opposite approach to how most people go after goals. Most people focus on the result and the outcome, not building the behavior first. So that's number one.
I just want to comment on that. I remember reading a study that people who talk about their goals, one of the things you might think is, tell all your friends about your goal, and then you're going to, because it gives you that sort of social commitment. But it turned out that people who spoke about it too much actually didn't achieve their goals as much as those who kept it quiet. And the theory of the article was that the reason was that people couldn't stick to their goals is because simply by talking about it, they felt so good about themselves. Look at me, I've got a goal, that they then didn't actually bother to do it, or as you're describing, they didn't bother to build the habits to make themselves achieve that goal.
Yeah. The interesting thing about accountability, it can be very powerful, but that's actually not what's happening in the case that you're describing, where someone talks about the goal that they're building. It actually isn't making them accountable to that goal. They're simply talking about it. They feel like they made progress on it because it's so top of mind, because they're talking about it that much, but they're not placing themselves into an environment where that's the norm, where the new behavior is the type of thing that everybody does. And that is probably a great segue into the second tip that I was going to give, which is all about environment. And there are two ways to look at this. The first is surround yourself with people who the thing that you want to achieve, for them, it's normal. For them, it's the standard. It's the thing they do each day. And when you're surrounded by people like that, you can talk about it on a health perspective and people who work out, talk about it from a money perspective. As an example in my own life, I had no entrepreneurs in my family when I started my business 4 years ago. And so the concept of someone running $1 million business was so foreign to me. It was, it wasn't part of my reality at all. Now I have 4 or 5 close friends who all are running businesses that make well over $500,000 a year. And it seems much more reasonable to me just because it's part of my reality now, not because of anything else. And so that idea, I think, is a very big shift of who am I surrounding myself with? What's the environment that I'm in? And is the new behavior the norm in that environment?
James, you have given us a huge amount of information. Let's dissect a little bit more, starting with number one. You pointed out that if you start small by developing a habit, and the example you gave was someone going to the gym, that for 5 minutes, ultimately you'll be able to increase the intensity. And it reminded me of one of the techniques that we often talk to people about paying off debt. Sometimes people get so mired in debt with credit card debt and school loans and personal loans and mortgages. It's so big. And one of the things we'll say is, what's the smallest loan you have? Oh, you owe $400 to someone? Let's pay that one off first. Because then once they've done that, it's easier to move up. And ultimately, they'll pay off the $4,000 and the $40,000 worth of loans they may have. But I think that your model of taking things in chunks that are reasonable for a person is a great way to move.
Well, basically, nothing, when it comes to building new behaviors and new habits, nothing matters if you don't perform the behavior consistently. I was, when I first was interested in starting to write consistently, I was talking to a friend of mine named Todd Henry, who's a published author. I said, Todd, I only write whenever I feel motivated or inspired, whenever I get this burst of inspiration, this creative muse. I feel like that's when I get my best ideas. What do you think about that? And he said, well, I only write whenever I feel motivated too. It just happens to be every day at 8 a.m. And that was when I realized, like, oh, this is the difference between professionals and amateurs, right? Like, amateurs do things when it's easy for them, when they feel motivated, when they feel inspired. Professionals do things on a schedule. They do things consistently. They show up time after time. And you can take that basic framework and apply it to nearly anything. If you want to apply it to debt, amateurs just pay it off whenever it's like, oh, I got an influx of cash and now it's easier for me. Professionals, people who are going to handle this like a pro, they commit to a consistent system and start to do things in small chunks and show up every day. Maybe that's just a little bit. Maybe you're only writing for 10 minutes every day at 8 a.m. Maybe you're only paying $10 of your debt off each week, but you're committing to that system. And that basic idea of doing things consistently and showing up and committing to the behavior rather than getting focused on the result, I think is sort of the central thesis of my approach to behavior change and habit formation.
We're talking with James Clear, who writes about science-based ideas for really improving your life and building habits. And, of course, one of the important habits that people need in order to build themselves financially successfully is, well, there are many habits, not the least of which is budgeting and saving and investing properly. But I want to touch on the second point, James, you made before about the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. And it's funny because just earlier today I was speaking to the grown-up daughter of a client I have. And I have a very nice couple, and they are just terrible with money. They can hardly save, and when they do, they spend it, and they have nothing put aside. And no matter how much I teach them and explain them and show them charts, they're just bad with money. And the daughter called me, and because now she's beginning to handle some of her own money, and she's also bad with money. She said something to me like, Doug, I need money to pay for such and such, but I really hope this is the last time I'm going to withdraw money from the account. And I was thinking to myself, boy, you sound just like your mother. And so how can someone who really wants to improve his situation, let's say in terms of personal finance, how do you surround yourself with people who are good at it?
Well, I think the first thing is we often start, again, this is similar to habits and goals. We start by focusing on a result. We think about how much money we want to make or how much money we need to save or whatever it happens to be, rather than focusing on an identity. And what I mean is, think about the result you'd like to achieve. Think about where you would like to go, the direction you want to head in, and then ask yourself, what is the identity of the type of person who could achieve that goal, of the type of person who's in that situation? What do they believe about themselves? What do they do on a day-to-day basis? And it's not only about building a new identity for yourself. So earlier I mentioned this idea of most people want to lose weight, but are you building the identity of becoming a type of person who doesn't miss workouts? So it's not just about building an identity for yourself, but it's also about surrounding yourself with a group that has the identity that you want. This is why, like fitness programs like CrossFit have become so popular and so compelling for a lot of people, is because you get into that system and you start to join the gym, and all of a sudden the identity that this culture has starts to manifest itself in you as well. Same way with religions. If you join a new religion, you choose to take on that identity, to take on that set of values and beliefs and cultural norms. And this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about behavior change. It's not just a change in result. It's a change in lifestyle. It's a change in what you think about yourself. It's a change in identity. And I have a friend of mine named Adam Gilbert who does nutritional coaching and consulting. And he often tells people when he's working with weight loss clients, if the only thing that changes is the food on your plate, you're not going to change for very long. And the basic idea is you have to develop a different relationship with food. You have to look at this behavior in a different way. And I would say that's just as true for money or fitness or any other habit or behavior that you're trying to
Let's touch on the money thing a little bit more. I understand I can go to a gym and be surrounded by people who are into it and maybe feel part of that community. But, if a guy goes home and his wife is spending too much and then he goes out and spends too much, you can't swap out your whole family for people who are financial nerds. What would you suggest in that case?
Sure. Well, the other way to look at environment is to automate things that so you take the decision making out of your hands, basically. The easiest way to make better decisions is to surround yourself with a set of defaults that are easier. And what I mean by this, I'll give an example. So there's a professor from Stanford University named BJ Fogg, and he talks about this concept of designing for laziness. And I think this is something that could really apply to a lot of different financial systems, personal budgeting, investing and saving, all sorts of different things. So his basic idea, the story he tells, he likes popcorn. He enjoyed eating popcorn, but he didn't want to eat it as much. So he took the popcorn out of his pantry, walked down the hall and into the garage, got up on the highest ladder in the garage and put it up on the highest shelf. Now, if he really wants the popcorn, he can just walk out there and get it. It's only 30 seconds away. But if he's designing for his lazy decision, his default action, the thing that he's going to do without thinking about it, then he's not going to go get the popcorn. And there are all sorts of things that we can set up in our financial lives to make the default decision easier, to design for your lazy choice so that the good choices are already made. You can automatically have X number of dollars withdrawal from your account 2 days after your paycheck hits and go into some type of savings account so that it's painless. You don't even think about it, it just happens. Same way with 401k withdrawals and matching from your company, depending on what options you have. There are a variety of things that you can do so that the decision making is taken away from you rather than putting those things in front of you. And then there are a number of things that you can do. Say you have this online shopping habit. You can buy apps. For example, there's an app called Freedom for Mac, and you can download that for $10, and it can block a website, any website you're choosing. Okay, so say, and this leads into a concept that's called decision fatigue, which is this basic idea that as we go throughout the day and make more decisions, our willpower fades, our motivation, ability to resist fades. And so you may find yourself often making a bad online shopping purchase late at night. Well, you can install a program like Freedom for Mac, or there's another one called Self-Control that will automatically block those websites from, say, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. And so you can't even get to it to shop. If you want to shop, you need to do it during the middle of the day, but your willpower is higher then, so you have a better likelihood of making a smart choice rather than a poor online shopping purchase late at night. So there are a variety of things you can do to structure your environment to make those default decisions better and take the decision-making out of your own hands.
James, that sounds like very, very brilliant idea. Just take the things that maybe you might slip on, and especially I think as it relates to money, because people often don't make good decisions, and they know they don't make good decisions, but the compounding effect of making poor investment decisions over decades means that you will fail financially, especially in retirement. So what I hear you're suggesting, which I think is fantastic, is that so many of the basic steps that people have to take to improve their financial situation can be automated. And if you don't know how to do it, just speak to your financial advisor who can set it up for you so that you will be able to if you can't make the habit yourself, at least you can have a system that forces you to do it. James, we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, tell us, how can people follow you, learn more about your work, and keep track of the new research that you're doing?
Sure. So I write every Monday and Thursday at jamesclear.com, and this conversation we've had about habits and building new behaviors, if you want more on that, I put together a free guide. It's 45 pages. It's called Transform Your Habits. It goes over the science of habit formation as well as some practical strategies you can use to implement new behaviors in your life. And they can download that at jamesclear.com/habits.
Okay, we'll put a link to that at the show notes of today's show of goldsteinongelt.com. James, thanks so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks, Doug.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world. If you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.